Now, on the topic of interests and sensitivities, let's move on to Taiwan. The Chinese Foreign Ministry misquoted India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar as agreeing with China's position that, quote, Taiwan is part of China, during talks with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. Now, India on Tuesday responded to the Chinese statement with its own, saying this. The Chinese side raised the issue of Taiwan. The Indian side underlined that there was no change in its position on this issue. It pointed out that, like the rest of the world, India has a relationship with Taiwan that focuses on economic, technological and cultural ties, and that this would continue. The Indian side noted that China also cooperates with Taiwan in these very domains. In your view, what was the aim of this misquotation by the Chinese Foreign Ministry?
I think there were a number of reasons why China did this. First of all, I would like to say that China has done this multiple times, perhaps not with India, with other countries. I think there were a number of reasons. And first reason was, of course, the US-India rift, and now perhaps they're taking advantage of that. Second, and I think there's this unease with respect to India's growing ties with Taiwan, and for the past several years, how India has been vocal about Taiwan. And the third reason is, I feel that recently, Marcos, Filipino president, was in India, and he talked about how Philippines could be drawn into this Taiwan contingency. So he talked about this on an Indian soil. So perhaps that was the thing, that now we have to talk about Taiwan on the Indian soil. But I think one of the most important reasons would be that perhaps this was a way to get back the reference to one China policy into the official statement, into the joint statement, perhaps eventually. But I think that it was just a way of telling domestic audience, or also people in Taiwan, that India is back on the one China policy, which is absolutely not true at all. That was not even misquotation. I thought that that was manipulation.
Right. And Professor Chen, Taiwan's ministry has come out and said that, that it was a deliberate fabrication, right, disregard for facts on the Chinese side, and also, most importantly, misleading the international community. What did you make of India's response? It didn't directly address this issue of whether Taiwan is part of China.
I think India so far has been accommodating the Chinese position, even though Chinese misquote Jaishankar's words, right? As Shana said, this happened a lot. If you look at the Chinese readout in the original Chinese text, you can see the discrepancy between different sentences. Like the sentence, Taiwan is part of China, is like putting in out of nowhere. It was talking about bilateral relationship, and suddenly Taiwan is part of China. So it is not consistent. So it's not something that Jaishankar would say to Wang Yi, right? But the problem here.
When you said that India is accommodating China, it didn't say that, as Sana pointed out, it didn't say that we acknowledge that you think that Taiwan is part of China. Right. It didn't say anything like that, did it?
That's what I want to say next. So if India really want to deny it, at least they can send officials or speakers of the foreign ministry to deny this quote, right? They didn't.
But it was on the External Affairs Ministry website as a statement.
There's a statement about what Jaishankar said.
Yeah, what I just read out.
If I may add to that. This has been India's policy that wherever there is a sensitive issue, be it Taiwan, be it any other country, unless and until it becomes urgent, Indian Foreign Ministry doesn't really, they just tell this to sources. This is one of the main policies of India. But in this statement, as you mentioned in this statement, that they specifically had to come out with statements. So I feel that India has, whenever it comes to one China policy, even though it used to adhere to the one China policy till 2008, Taiwan was never ever a part of India's acknowledgement, acceptance or recognition of whatever one China policy. So there was always this ambiguity. And I feel the statement that they had to come out on Taiwan was very much that Taiwan is an important economic and technological partner for India. And if China could cooperate with Taiwan, so are other countries are also eligible, and they should also cooperate.
Yeah, I mean, Professor Chen, I actually thought it was quite clever what the Indian response did.
Yes.
It pointed out, it skipped it, but it basically said, we maintain diplomatic relations with Taiwan, right?
And you're doing the same thing.
So if we really did believe that Taiwan was part of China, we wouldn't be dealing with Taiwan, right? Do you agree with that?
Or? So I think the statement just made it very clear that the India government can do whatever they are doing right now to keep enhancing relations with Taiwan in every ground. However, it should not touch upon the sensitive political issue and sovereignty issue.
Now to Tibet. Xi Jinping has visited Tibet to mark the 60th anniversary of its founding as a Chinese autonomous region, stressing that, quote, to govern, stabilize and develop Tibet, the first priority is to maintain political stability, social stability, ethnic unity and religious harmony. Accompanying him was top CCP ideologue Wang Huning, who has responsibility for the PRC's United Front policy portfolio. When she talks about stability, ethnic unity, religious harmony, what does this mean in terms of Tibet's cultural and religious autonomy, which is what it should be getting as an autonomous region?
I think it has long been established that there's hardly any autonomy in Tibet. And specifically how his visits to Tibet has increased. And recently we also saw the biggest dams on Yarlung Sangpo. So I do feel that it's just about consolidating more and more its claim on Tibet and then make it a place where there is hardly any Tibet religion or culture. It's all Hanization, it's all CCP that we see in Tibet now.
Professor Chen, the addition of Wang Huning's presence, what did that contribute?
I think it contributes how much the high up in CCP really pay attention to Tibet right now. I think this is related to what Dalai Lama said about his secession. His secession plan really rattled Beijing and makes Beijing want to put attention on Tibet. Otherwise, we haven't seen so many attention on Tibet's governance for many years. But all of a sudden, the CCP members try to pay attention to Tibet. I think this is pretty extraordinary.
And Sana, India sympathizes with Tibet, with the Dalai Lama, who fled in 1959 from Mao's troops and has made India his home. What is India's position on Tibet's autonomy and its future? As we heard, the Dalai Lama is now 90 years old, and China wishes to select or control the selection of the next Dalai Lama. What happens if the Dalai Lama says that his successor is a child that is born in India?
I think India will accept or India will acknowledge, but India doesn't really have a say on the institution of Dalai Lama or a reincarnation of Dalai Lama. So I think official policy is it's not our business, so we don't have to. We already have a lot of issues. India does sympathize with Dalai Lama, with the Tibetan community, but beyond that, I do not really see India doing much with that. And this is one of the criticisms of India's policy as well, that India hasn't really used Tibet card. Despite having so many Tibetans on its own soil, India hasn't been able to utilize that to its own benefit.
Now, she also said China's mega hydropower project must be pursued, quote, vigorously as part of China's environmental goals. During Wang Yi's visit, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar underlined India's concerns with regard to the mega dam construction being undertaken by China in the lower reaches of the Yarlung Tsangpo or Brahmaputra River, which India says will have implications for lower riparian states. India strongly underlined the need for utmost transparency in this regard. Professor Chen, again, how does transparency improve the situation of China potentially weaponizing water? And again, how big a tension is this in their relationship?
Well, let me just clarify here. The chance for China to weaponize their water source is pretty limited because of the geography, because of the rainfall of the Brahmaputra River. So the source of the water doesn't come entirely from upstream. So the chance of weaponizing it could be limited. However, the damage to the ecosystem in the local area, in the mountain area, would be difficult to estimate. That's what India is concerned about. But I don't expect that China will respond to India's concern.
Sana, do you agree with that assessment? It's actually the environmental damage which then causes the implications for the lower riparian states, or is there an element of weaponizing water?
To some extent, I agree with Dr. Chan, but of course, I feel that there is an element of weaponization of water as well, and not just with India, but also other countries, Bangladesh and other countries as well. But I feel that what China has been doing is there's lack of transparency. So, of course, we don't know what is going to happen. Of course, there are going to be ecological challenges. But then since we do not have any data, no one really knows what are going to be the ecological impact and what are going to be the hydrological impact on countries that are lower riparian.
So this is the leverage that China does have over India being the higher riparian state. Mm-hmm. So next, let's talk about the border. Both sides agreed to establish an expert group under the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination to explore so-called early harvest steps in boundary delimitation. Professor Chen, what do you make of these steps? Can they help to keep the peace when there is the underlying issue of China essentially wanted to take more land through salami slicing?
It is very hard to make prediction right now because nothing hasn't been done. Nothing has been done yet. So we can only estimate that so far both countries have the intention, have the sincerity to reach agreement and try to cool down the situation. So there is a chance that this might be an institutionalized coordination, like a conflict resolution mechanism for India and China. Mm-hmm. That doesn't prevent conflicts from happening along the border, but when it happens, both sides have the sincerity to sit down and discuss it and de-escalate. I think that will be the most important thing.
This is not something that's new. We have a number of mechanisms, confidence building measures between India and China. And that was one of the criticisms that Jaishankar actually said when Galwan clashes happened, that China has been violating the confidence building measures. So special representative talks since 2003, agreements since 1990s. But my point is that it's all intentional. It's not a miscalculation. On the India-China border, the standoffs had been very, very intentional with a motive. So I don't think in such a situation, such working mechanisms, confidence-building measures actually help. It's actually useless. So it's just crowding the list, I would say.